Warning: the following video is intended for mature audiences only. It will contain criticisms for both fighters. If you have any emotional distress due to negative statements directed towards Terence Crawford or Errol Spence, please take a second and breathe. And stop it, get some help. Then like the video, let's go! You know me, I'm not really one for intros and dragging things out, except for this vid. But we're gonna work outside, then we're gonna work mid-range inside, then we're gonna work intangible stuff, and then we're gonna do hypothesis. Or maybe we'll mix the intangibles in, who knows, let's find out. Starting with Errol Spence on the outside. For him, the key is gonna be variation and feints. Disguising his entries, not being repetitive with his entries. I always say that with him, because that's where he's gonna run into the most trouble. That's where he ran into a lot of trouble throughout his career. And so here's him facing Kell Brook, somebody with the timing and reflexes to punish him for being repetitive and predictable, the same way Terence Crawford could. And now we're gonna go into detail about not as much detail as I did in other videos, but detail about how he starts with the feints early on, establishing that foundation, then builds upon the feints to land big shots.
Wants to dictate the pacing. That's true, but you know, Errol Spence, you need these rounds. I mean, some different angles and one has got and land when he can.
Level change, then jab to the body.
That the judges are watching that and spent a step sharper here in this fight against Ugas.
And these level change shots are very useful in this fight because Crawford has shown a susceptibility to them. So here's an example of Terence Crawford getting caught by a level change. So the level change jab to the body from Kavaliauskas, getting him to think low. And then when he thinks low, he goes up high with the level change. On top of that, once his entries are varied up and he's landing shots, he can start working behind that jab and he can start walking Terence Crawford down more effectively, like how he wants to do. But first things first is that he has to vary his setup so that he's not constantly getting pivoted around, circled around, getting checked, hooked, and all that by Terence Crawford. And so the key for him is going to be varying up his entries so that Terence Crawford won't dance circles around him and counter him coming in. For Crawford, I think a lot of the keys in this fight are going to be mimicked for how he performed in the Shawn Porter fight. So for one, he needs to be springy, bouncy, and reactive with his feet. Don't just stand in front of Spence. And then that also translates to combos. So when he's throwing combos, get out of range.
Dynamic fight early on. Fascinating fight. Porter sneaks in to 60. Good combination. Left hand to the body again. And again.
You want to be controlling the distance and controlling where the fight happens at all times. So for Crawford, that means pivoting when Spence comes in and punching, pivoting when Spence is coming in behind punches.
It's the southpaw stance. Good action here. Collected and sticking. Hands. But Crawford is having issues trying to slow down Porter.
And then where he can, when he has Spence following him, set those lateral movement traps to catch Spence coming in as well. If he can accomplish all of these, then he's likely to be very successful in the outside fight. So I'll try and keep the mid-range and inside section of the video short and brief, so that way we can get straight to the prediction and hypothesis, because I got so much content covering that. If you want to see deep and detailed analysis of all that, go click the videos on my channel. But for right now, I'll keep it brief. When it comes to the mid-range, that's going to be a lot more closer, and I think that's going to be the most entertaining part of the fight, because I think Crawford has great timing as far as him having so many KOs in mid-range and him having access to more of his arsenal. And I think Spence is going to have access to more of his arsenal in terms of the combination punches he's going to be able to put together. And so in mid-range, I do give Crawford the edge just because he showed the ability to KO people in mid-range consistently. But Spence is going to be able to do a lot more damage in mid-range than he was from the outside, which is where I think Crawford has the advantage. But on the inside, on the other hand, Spence definitely has the advantage there because Crawford has shown the ability to definitely neutralize a lot of people when they're trying to fight on the inside, like Porter and Horn. But Spence has shown a masterful ability at the highest levels to consistently deny clinches and get to work, and he's very undeniable on the inside. People, they just can't escape him. Once he starts working on the inside, it usually turns into a brutal beatdown. And so with Crawford, he's great at neutralizing people, but he has holes in that game, and he's been caught up by inferior inside fighters, in my opinion. And so I think Spence is going to take advantage of some of those openings if it becomes an inside fight, and he's going to put in some really good work. So instead of me bringing up clip after clip after clip, I got 2 clips. One for Spence denying the clinch and using some of his tools just to give you the type of idea of what he has in his bag when it comes to forcing the inside fight. And then for Crawford, we're going to do the opposite, show a clip of him getting in his bag to neutralize the inside fight, shut it down. So here comes the Spence part versus the clinch. Ugas is trying to come in, clinch up, smother the offensive options. Errol Spence is framing with that right arm to create space between them. Ugas tries to wrap him. By the way, I gotta pause every now and then just to keep it copyright friendly. Here we go, back to it. With the right arm, but he doesn't do it properly, so Errol Spence makes space. His left arm comes free. His left arm is framing off the head to keep the space. Yeah, so this is just a description of all the frames, all the controls, all the strength, all the lever, everything he's doing. Ugas is trying his damnedest to get control of Spence and shut him down. Errol Spence backs up, still trying to create space. He gets low, shoulder digs into the ribcage, pushes him back. And then at that point, he has space and he's able to go right back to the inside fight. And he jumps out to the outside, but then he goes right back. He gets hit with a right hand that causes him to go up against the ropes, and so he has to duck and smother. He gets underneath with his shoulder, puts the left hand up to guard against the right hand, has his right arm controlling the left shoulder of Horn, so he's trying to neutralize the punch options. He jumps back to make space to try and escape. Horn closes in, he gets clipped with a right hook. Now he gets a heavy underhook underneath the left arm of Horn. As you can see, if you look at his feet, he's getting lifted off his feet. So he has a lot of leverage. He uses that leverage to turn Horn around, put him against the ropes, and neutralize the inside fight. Now, onto the part everyone's been waiting for. The hypothesis, or what normal people call it a prediction, but I stick with the theme because we in the sweet science lab. I'll just be straight up off the bat. I got Crawford winning, which I've said in comments multiple times before, but I think the key for Crawford is going to be the fact that Spence is going to have a lot of trouble catching him. If Crawford moves as much as he should, Spence is going to have a lot of trouble catching him, just like how he had trouble catching Porter when Porter would start laterally moving. The difference there is that Porter isn't as elusive with his footwork as Crawford. Porter's probably faster, but Crawford's more elusive and he's capable. He has more tools with his feet as well, as far as pivots go and things like that. And so I think Spence isn't going to be able to make it the type of fight he wants, and Crawford's going to be controlling the range, and Crawford's going to be fighting from the outside, and from the outside is where Spence runs into a lot of issues. On the crucial keys outside for Spence part 2, I talked about that overextension and him being off balance, but the older version of Spence could get away with that a lot more. But this, when I say older, I mean years ago. This is technically the older Spence, and this version of Spence is a lot more stiff with his upper body, and the athleticism, the explosiveness isn't necessarily the same. And so when he's compromised in those off balance position from missing big shots, he can't recover as much, and you see that he's kind of like stuck there for a pretty long period of time. And I think the more he makes those mistakes, the more Crawford's going to punish him. He was kind of getting away with that with Ugas and Garcia. Ugas punished him a couple of times, but I think Crawford's going to punish him more than a couple of times. I think Spence could be more successful on the outside, like I said earlier, if he's working behind face and he's varying up the way he's entering in the range. But I think what's interesting is that Spence's greatest strength is his consistency, but in this fight that may be his greatest weakness. I think this is more of a stylistic matchup flaw than anything. Is that his consistency allows him to buzzsaw through tough opponents that just won't break, but he has the consistency to break them. But I think the difference here is that consistency is going to spell bad news for him, in the sense that Crawford is going to be able to consistently predict the patterns, because Spence is going to be able to consistently give him the same patterns to predict. So yeah, I think Crawford should also test the body, because of I saw some weird react. I remember watching it live, the Garcia and the Ugas fight in particular, when Spence was getting hit to the body, he was reacting a little bit weird, not how he did in the past. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. Crawford should do that. Crawford's an underrated body puncher himself. And then I noted this in the Inoue fight, but it's a similar issue here, just the opposite. I'm heavily biased towards Spence, and I didn't realize how biased I was towards Spence in terms of me wanting him to win until the fight got closer and closer. I was like, oh my god, I just getting so nervous, because your heart pulls you one way, but your eyes pull you another. But if you're an analyst, you have to trust your eyes more than your heart. At least that's how I feel, which is ironic. But I think Crawford has so many other tools. I said this for Inoue, and I was biased towards Inoue, but my eyes made me see that Inoue was the superior fighter to Fulton, despite me being biased towards him. I was like, yeah, I'm biased, but I see this, and that. And here I'm biased towards Spence, but regardless, or despite that, I see Crawford just having so many stylistic tools that's just gonna shut down a lot of what makes Spence successful. I think, like I noted in the video, I was like, well, Ugas, when he countered Spence in between punches, Spence slowed down. He was like, wait a second, let me recalibrate. I think Crawford can do the same thing, but even worse, because he's an even better counter puncher than Ugas, and he's an even harder puncher than Ugas. So I think he's definitely gonna earn Spence's respect, and he's gonna slow down the pace of this fight, because Spence is gonna get countered, and it's gonna be interesting to see how he reacts to that. But yeah, I got Crawford. And I'll go deeper into the keys for how both of them can win this fight. But yeah, I think Spence is gonna get him on the ropes at times and corner him and work. I don't see Spence getting outclassed. Some people say he's gonna get outclassed. I don't see that. It's hard to pick against Spence in the first place, because the dude is unstoppable. Like he just always finds a way to win. He's an unstoppable force, but doesn't mean he's unbeatable. So I'll go into my detailed explanation of how I see the fight going, my simulation. Early on, I think Spence's jab is going to be a problem for Crawford, especially if Spence doesn't step in behind it, meaning that he walks in the range and throws a jab rather than stepping in the range while throwing a jab. That's what I mean. Crawford is going to be very reactive and hesitant early as he gets settled, so I think he's going to be like very springy with his feet and like bouncing, and he's going to be hesitant with his punches. He usually is. And Spence will also get slowed down by counters, like I said earlier. Once Crawford starts finding the shots, he can start winning the rounds. I do think Crawford can win rounds versus Spence, despite Spence having a higher work rate. Plenty of fighters with low work rates have beat him in rounds before, and I think Crawford's capable of that as well, especially if he's not in front of Spence for Spence to hit him. There was a part of the Ugas vid where Spence is off balance after missing a punch and tries to crash in. And I left this part out. I said I left this part out, but the way he was positioned when his body was lowered down, I was like, holy! He was right in line for a southpaw uppercut, basically a southpaw backhand uppercut. And Errol keeps his head on the center line and ducks too consistently for Crawford not to punish the pattern. Spence will get hurt likely around round 4 or 6, but I think he will likely hurt Crawford before. And I think he'll hurt Crawford first with like a level change hook. He may even drop him. But what possibly could happen is, if Crawford gets hurt or dropped, is that Spence is obviously going to put on the pressure, and that Crawford might hit him with something as Spence is coming in and getting too greedy and irresponsible. To be honest, that can happen to either one of them, because they both really aggressive finishers, but Crawford's way more calculated. His punches do get wild and weird, but you could tell he's focused, and he steps back, gives himself range and stuff like that. I think Crawford's the better finisher too, but I could see Spence hurting Crawford pretty bad regardless. That's why I think the Hagler Hearns comparison has always been fun, because I can see that happen. It is possible for Crawford to win a decision if he shuts down the duck, like how I've broken down in previous videos, how Spence ducks and then crashes in with his body to get on the inside. If he shuts down the duck and he shuts down the jab with counters, if Crawford can counter that jab like how Kell Brook was capable of, then Spence is in a lot of trouble. But sadly, this doesn't seem like a decision to me because Crawford is deadly and intelligent, basically. I have the 60-40 in favor of Crawford. The 40 is Spence being crafty and forcing an inside fight where he breaks Crawford down responsibly. So the 40 is gonna look like Spence cutting off the ring, Spence landing his jab, Spence closing the distance consistently, and Spence doing what he always does, which is just break people down. And I think he can definitely break down Crawford. I question Crawford's durability. I've done that in the past. I question his durability. I question that chin. I don't know if I question his endurance that much, but I question his endurance if he's fighting Spence. I think Spence can overwhelm him. I just think that's not likely what's gonna happen. And so I have Crawford winning, despite me wanting Spence to win, but I'm fine with being proven wrong on this one. I mean, I don't like to lose. I like my predictions to be correct, but this is one of those rare cases where I'm like, I kind of hope I'm wrong, but my eyes tell me that I'm right. Immortality Serum out.
How can I die if I'm immortal? Monster in my eyes, I'm immoral. I ain't got no time to be cordial. Ripping up shit, I'm making big decisions. I'm feeling fly and important. Lightning striking and torching all of my rivals turn to